Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across suburban Temecula, California, a sense of normalcy lingered in the air. Families bustled about, hurriedly preparing for the evening, children clamoring for crayons, a father fiddling with the grill in the backyard, and a mother stationed at the kitchen island, chopping vegetables for dinner. But in the simplicity of a vibrant neighborhood like this, darkness had quietly seeped in, unseen and uninvited. It was December 10, 2018, when the bustling evening routine of the Daniel family was interrupted by the 5-year-old Sofia Daniel, a bright-eyed girl with wild curls and an infectious laugh, had gone missing from her own front yard. It was a normal winter afternoon. Her mother, Lisa, had stepped inside to fetch a cookie, convinced that her daughter was darting between the flower beds, engaging in an imaginary game of hide and seek. When Lisa returned outside moments later, the fears of 1,000 worst-case scenarios washed over her. The backyard, once filled with the joy of childhood play, had turned into a stage for panic. The air felt heavy, nearly suffocating. Sofia, her voice trembled as she called out for her daughter, her heart racing. Silence was her only answer. As dusk settled in, neighborhood children who once played freely began filing home, parents pulling them away from the eerie stillness that had seized the air. Lisa dialed 911, her hands shaking as hope twisted into desperation. Stellar memories of chubby fingers and giggles morphed into nightmares of what could lurk just beyond the glow of their porch lights. It was a call that would rip through the fabric of this peaceful community, revealing a terrifying truth. Some secrets prefer to fester in the penumbra of ordinary life, waiting for a moment of weakness to emerge. The victim. Sofia Daniel was a child who embraced life with spirited enthusiasm, her exuberance evident to anyone who crossed her path. With her wild golden curls and sparkling green eyes brimming with curiosity, she was a fixture in the neighborhood, a little explorer who could often be found collecting treasures from her backyard. Smooth stones, brightly colored leaves, and the occasional bug that fascinated her imagination. Lisa always marveled at Sofia's ability to conjure adventure from the mundane, her laughter echoing through the yard as she played. Born into a close-knit family, Sofia was the eldest among 3 children. Her younger siblings, Ethan and Mia, adored her, often trailing behind as she led them on adventures through their playroom jungle or the family's modest garden. Lisa would sometimes watch from the kitchen as Sofia invented elaborate games, their giggles mingling with the scents of dinner simmering on the stove. The world felt safe within those walls, full of love and promise. But as the shadows lengthened on that fateful evening, uncertainty blanketed the Daniels' home. In the hours that followed her disappearance, local volunteers poured into the neighborhood, lights twinkling from flashlights in the encroaching dark, casting weary shadows upon the search for the missing girl. Posters were quickly drawn up, Sofia's face beaming and innocent, her frozen smile becoming a haunting symbol of dread for everyone involved. Though it was difficult to reconcile the vibrance of Sofia's spirit with her absence, it was the palpable void that resonated. Most families gathered, passing around cups of coffee and swapping whispered fears, their voices low and somber, each searching for answers, glancing anxiously towards the inky night. Among the throng, Lisa felt a growing sense of unease, a gnawing dread that she couldn't shake. She clung to hope, But with each pulse of time, fear whispered doubts into her heart. What if there was more lurking in this stillness than they anticipated? What if Sofia was not just lost, but ensnared in a darkness none of them could see? The crime scene. As the night deepened around the Daniel residence, blue and red lights began to punctuate the darkness, illuminating the otherwise peaceful street. Officers from the Temecula Police Department arrived in a coordinated rush, their presence transforming the family's front yard into an area of concern. Conversations shifted from worried whispers to emergency protocols as they secured the scene, tape strung across the entrances, marking the boundaries of a place now fraught with uncertainty. Detective Mark Gray stepped out of his cruiser, his breath visible in the chilly air. He was an experienced investigator, known for his steadfast demeanor. Having navigated countless crimes, each one tugging at his sense of justice. But as he surveyed the scene before him, the pang of childhood innocence lost reverberated in his gut. He stepped forward, the glow from his flashlight capturing fragments of the chaos surrounding the family home. Nestled in the yard were toys discarded in hasty and overturned tricycle, and a pink stuffed bear, its stitching fraying from countless adventures. Distant sirens echoed in the late-night quiet, casting an unsettling droning over the neighborhood. To Detective Gray, these relics of childhood felt eerie, out of place against the growing narrative of fear gripping the community. He asked the officers to widen the perimeter, ensuring no stone would go unturned. Begin a thorough search of the immediate area, he instructed. His voice steady, but his mind racing with possibilities. The path leading to the parks where children played during the day was now fraught with unseen dangers. As the search team deployed flashlights and began their grid pattern, a palpable tension across the darkness held secrets, and each shadow felt charged with foreboding. Minutes dragged like hours as Detective Gray listened to the muffled voices of parents, their hopes smothered by the encroaching dread of the unknown. Lisa stood nearby, her gaze hollow as she clung to her remaining children, their faces sick with fear. The air grew thick with a mixture of desperation and apprehension as the community strained their ears, listening for any sound that might herald Sofia's return, the sound of laughter, of little feet thumping on the ground, anything to pierce the silence that loomed heavily around them. But the silence held its ground, pressing down harder still. The early investigation. As dawn approached, bringing with it feeble rays of light that struggled to penetrate the relentless night, the atmosphere around the Daniel residence was charged with urgency. Barely awake, Detective Gray navigated through a tapestry of fleeting conversations between officers, volunteers, and the distraught family. The sun rose slowly, washing the street in a muted palette of gold and pink, but it offered little comfort against the chilling reality we're still without Sofia. With hours passing since the initial report, Gray gathered the officers for a briefing, his tone all business. We're operating under the assumption that Sofia is in immediate danger. I want every resource devoted to this case. He emphasized the point, knowing that every moment lost could deepen the crisis. Analyzing the facts that had emerged, he began with a critical question. Where had Sofia been last seen? Lisa recounted the events repeatedly, her voice shaky but clear, while Detective Gray jotted down notes. The child had been outside alone, playing in an area familiar to her. Yet, on that day, shadows lurked in corners that were previously harmed. As the detective sifted through the potential leads, he interviewed neighbors. In the houses to either side of the Daniels, Sympathetic faces peered through windows, yet one woman seemed to hold an aura of unease. Margaret, a mother of two, reported having seen a blue car parked suspiciously near the Daniel residence just before Sofia disappeared. She described the vehicle in detail, the model, the peculiar dent on the passenger door. "Did you see who was inside?" Detective Gray pressed, the lead instinctively igniting a fire in his gut. Margaret shook her head, recalling the chill that had overcome her as she watched the car park, its engine idling for longer than necessary. "I thought nothing of it at the time, just a car passing through." Her brows furrowed with concern, offering a glint of regret. In hindsight, questions plagued everyone. Back at the command post, the air buzzed with renewed vigor as officers continued compiling the information. Detective Gray knew they had to ramp up awareness in the community, not only to expedite Sofia's return, but also to send a clear message to lurking threats. This town would not stand idly by while Innocence slipped away. Flyers were printed, and a press release prepared the world needed to know that a child was missing, that an injustice was unfolding beneath the surface of every quiet home. Each passing moment felt like sand slipping through an hourglass, and they had to act swiftly before it was too late. The dead ends. Days turned into a blur of frantic activity. Search teams combing every inch of the neighborhood, volunteers distributing flyers with Sofia's cherubic face splashed across them, and law enforcement following up on tips that ranged from the absurd to the hopeful. Yet, as dawn broke on the 5th day since Sofia's disappearance, the trail grew colder. Detective Gray sat in his cramped office, the illuminated screen of his laptop flickering with countless leads. He ran through the reports again, each mention of suspicious sightings meticulously documented, each statement from neighbors adding to the growing labyrinth of unsubstantiated clues. He felt the weight of failure pressing down on him, the frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He had seen this too many times before, the sense of urgency, colliding with the stark reality that people sometimes vanished without a trace. One lead put forth by a local man had drawn the attention of the department. He'd claimed to see a woman with a child matching Sofia's description being escorted by a man into a nearby park. Hours were spent gathering witness statements, but as officers interviewed those in the vicinity, confusion reigned. No one else had seen any interaction. Various sketches were drawn based on vague descriptions, but games of memory played little role against the reality of the missing girl. Only whispers of false alarms echoed through the precinct's halls. A reported sighting of Sofia at a convenience store turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. An abandoned blue car, suspected to be connected to her abduction, lay undisturbed in a long-forgotten corner of the neighborhood, a mere relic of another passing train of thought. Each dead end felt like a tightening noose around Gray's resolve, chipping away at his confidence to bring resolution to a family in torment. Around town, tension festered as days slipped by. Rumors spread like wildfire, people suggesting that the Daniels were hiding something, or worse, that they had something to do with their daughter's disappearance. Dark corners sprang up amid public sympathy, a community torn between hope and suspicion. Detective Gray knew that while the investigation was unfolding, so too was a story that could tarnish the Daniels narrative, and he fought against the tide of speculation. Late at night, in the solitude of his office, he stared at the tenacity of the unsolved case files. On his desk, tangled web of disappearances, each grim tale a testament to the shadows that danced just below the surface of family life. Gray was determined, but he also felt the creeping dread that he was running out of time. Desperation fueled his resolve, And with every dead end came the realization that they needed to dig deeper, lest Sofia's story disappear entirely into the void of unknowing. A break in the case. The sun hung high in the sky as day 6 passed, casting a harsh glow over Temecula. Tension still wrapped tightly around the small community, robbing it of peace and festering into frustration as the search for Sofia Daniel stagnated. Just as Detective Gray sank into a weary routine of revisiting potential leads that amounted to nothing, a breakthrough arrived, shattering the weight of heavy silence. That afternoon, a call came into the precinct from an anonymous tipster. The voice on the line trembled with urgency, speaking of a possible sighting at the local flea market that very morning. Gray listened intently, scribbling notes as the caller recounted witnessing a young girl that resembled Sofia, accompanied by a woman. There was something peculiar about the pair, the caller asserted. The woman appeared frantic, her eyes darting as if seeking an escape route. The detective's pulse quickened as he drew the paper closer, his instincts igniting once more. Within minutes, Gray rallied a team and headed toward the bustling marketplace. The atmosphere buzzed with the chaotic chatter of shoppers and the scent of street food. Yet Gray was focused, his eyes scanning each face, each interaction. He knew they needed visuals, and fast. They needed people to remember. Local vendors reported an unusual sale a few hours earlier. A woman had purchased an assortment of clothing in sizes intended for young children, along with a small child's backpack. These items would normally be unremarkable, but in the context of the case, they became a beacon of hope, glimmering in an otherwise foggy landscape. Detective Gray met with the salesman, a weary man with deeply set eyes. Pulling out a mobile device, he began scrolling through photographs of purchases taken that day. A tightness clenched in Gray's stomach when he spotted a blurry image there. Just behind the shadow of a display was a woman who closely resembled their description. Gray felt the adrenaline coursing through him as he leaned in for a closer look. "Can you retrieve security footage?" he asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of hope surging within him. Back at the precinct, the footage was uploaded for analysis. As he sat with the tech specialists, every second felt eternal. Then the visual material flickered to life, first hazy, then clearer as the playback began. Gray's breath caught in his throat. There she was, a motherly figure dressed in a dark sweater, holding a child by the hand in unmistakable resemblance to Sofia, her curls bouncing with each hurried step. As the images were analyzed closely, the urgency grew. They could see the anxiety etched on the woman's face. With each second that passed, Gray sensed they were walking a tightrope between hope and despair, between truth and ambiguity. Armed with the critical observation and the unfamiliar direction the investigation was now taking, Gray prepared to mobilize the team. Finally, a crack in the case had appeared, illuminating a pathway they were eager to explore. It was time to chase down the new lead. Time to catch up to the shadow that had slipped through their fingers for too long. And maybe, just maybe, it was also time to bring Sofia home. The suspect. Early the following morning, Detective Gray gathered his team for a debriefing around a large whiteboard cluttered with photographs, notes, and timelines. The air crackled with energy as he presented the snapshots from the flea market. "This is our woman," he declared, gesturing to the still images of the nervous figure clutching Sofia's hand. "We need to identify her immediately. She's our lead. She's our lead." The team buzzed with renewed vigor, assigning roles to trace any known associates of the woman in the footage. As officers delved into databases, questioning potential witnesses from the flea market, Gray waited anxiously for updates, determined to unearth the truth. The anxiety in the air was palpable, the burgeoning hope accompanied by the weight of uncertainty. Hours later, a uniformed officer rushed into Gray's office, breathless yet resolute. "Detective, I think we've found some." The officer held out a printout of a license plate captured on the security footage as the woman drove away from the market. "It's registered to a Jennifer Larkin. Last known address is just outside of town." Gray's heart raced. Jennifer Larkin was a name that had surfaced in the dark recesses of local gossip a few years prior. A woman whose own child had been taken from her service in the foster care system. The circumstances surrounding that case had always been marked by tragedy and turmoil, a life woven into tales of instability and loss. "Let's pay her a visit," Gray replied, his mind already racing through the implication. The disparity between that motherly figure in the video and the woman who could have lost custody sparked a sinister curiosity. There was a tension to the idea, one where pain often manifested in unpredictable and dangerous ways. The team arrived at a modest mobile home on the outskirts of Temecula, the sun casting long shadows over the yard littered with remnants of the past. Toys abandoned in the dirt, a broken swing hanging from rusted chain. It whispered of a troubled narrative, the struggle of a mother too familiar to Gray. Detective Gray knocked firmly, the sound reverberating against the metal frame. Moments stretched into an eternity before the door creaked open. Jennifer Larkin stood in the doorway, an apprehensive look flitting across her features. She was unkempt, hair tied back haphazardly, her eyes scanning the officers warily. "Detective Gray," he introduced himself, exuding calm confidence despite the simmering tension. "We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding your whereabouts recently, specifically about the flea market." Jennifer's expression shifted, the fear solidifying into something heavier. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. Yet the waver in her voice told a different story. Gray felt the pulse of tension tighten around them. As they began to question her about the sighting, Jennifer's demeanor shifted. Fear turned to frustration. Her responses became scattered, filled with contradictions. Gray stared intently at her eyes, searching for the truth buried beneath layers of panic and defensiveness. A fragile facade and tangible desperation gripping her rekindled the urgency of their mission. Could this woman be a life vest on a sinking ship, or a tempest hiding unthinkable darker depth? With each question, every detail about Sofia became a thread stitched tightly between them. The weight of the search felt tangible as they navigated through her fears and evasion. Detective Gray remained laser-focused, resolved to peel back the layers of this complex case, driven by one relentless thought. Time was slipping away, and every moment was a chance to seize the lifeline Sofia could still be found. The trial. Months passed since the initial eruption of distress, and the toll it took on the community was visible. The disappearance of Sofia Daniel had fractured the veneer of safety in Temecula, transforming the once quiet town into a battleground of suspicion and gossip. Now, the once joyous chatter outside the Daniel home was replaced with news vans lining the street, broadcasting updates on the high-profile trial of Jennifer Larkin. The courtroom was a somber arena, charged with anticipation as the proceedings began. Detective Gray had meticulously built a case against Larkin, leading to charges of kidnapping and unlawful detention. Photographs from the surveillance footage were displayed prominently, illustrating the lingering visual evidence of the alleged crime. Images of the nervous woman grasping Sofia's hand flickered on the monitor, and a hush fell over the court. Gray sat amongst the solemn rows of spectators, Lisa and her family present, their expressions a mixture of hope and despair as they clung tightly to one another. Lisa's eyes bore the weight of countless sleepless nights, constantly searching for any glimmer of joy amidst the grim reality. She was determined to find her daughter, and the courtroom became yet another battleground in her fight to uncover the truth. As the prosecution presented its case, evidence painted a disheartening narrative. Witnesses detailed their encounters with Larkin, her erratic behavior reported to the authorities long before Sofia had disappeared. The attorneys skillfully laid out the timeline, depicting Larkin's life riddled with instability, a carousel of foster care and neglect that implied a woman desperately seeking a connection that had eluded her. In her defense, Larkin appeared withdrawn, cloaked in an aura of survival rather than guilt. Her attorney countered every accusation, painting a picture of a woman mistaken for a criminal. They offered explanations. Larkin had seen Sofia, had wanted to help, and perhaps had made a grave error in her judgment. Sympathy pulsed through the courtroom, chipping at the solid wall of certainty constructed by the prosecution. But Detective Gray understood that perspective was a fragile weapon. In his experience, desperation bore potential for darkness, a yearning for family that could incubate envy and madness. It was during cross-examination that Gray's resolve sharpened. He watched as the defense attempted to discount pivotal pieces of evidence, dismissing the weight of the surveillance footage as mere coincidence. Then came the moment that could tilt the entire trial. The prosecution summoned a surprise witness, a former friend of Larkin's who had grown increasingly uneasy about her erratic behavior. As the witness recounted discussions of Larkin lamenting her lost child and wistfully mentioning Sofia down to her recognizable curls, the atmosphere thickened. Gray observed Larkin's face contort through a spectrum of emotions, the steady facade fracturing in real time. The courtroom pulsed with tension as the jury reached a turning point, all eyes never leaving Larkin. Gray felt the call of anticipation thrumming through him, and, at the trial's climax, stood before the bench to share his reflections as the detective who had poured his heart into this case. He detailed the investigation's harrowing journey, the pain of the family, and the unyielding hope that kept them moving forward. Finally, the window of deliberation emerged, and as the jury filed back into the courtroom, time warped into slow motion. Gripped by dread, Lisa squeezed her husband's hand. The breath in the room was weighty, refusing to budge. The foreman's voice cut through the silence. "We find the defendant, Jennifer Larkin, guilty." The impact of the words thundered within the walls, echoing across the fractured hearts of everyone present. Relief and sorrow, mixed as tears, cascaded down Lisa's cheeks. While Larkin's actions would face judgment, the void of Sofia's absence remained, an unhealable wound. The trial concluded, but the quest for closure was far from over. Detective Gray understood that the true narrative could never be sewn up neatly. There would be lingering questions, shadows of consequence, and a new reality for the Daniel family, where tarnished innocence struggled against silence. One truth remained constant. It would take time, resilience, and newfound hope to heal and illuminate the paths ahead. As the gavel came down, The struggling echoes still whispered that the fight for Sofia's memory was far from finished. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, the town of Temecula wrestled with an unsettling mix of closure and grief. As Jennifer Larkin was sentenced to 15 years in prison, the narrative had shifted from sorrowful desperation to a struggle for healing. The Daniels family faced the world with a heavy heart, each day a battlefield in which they fought to find some semblance of normalcy amidst the wreckage left behind. Sofia's absence lingered like a ghost in their home. The playroom, once a vibrant sanctuary of laughter and toys, stood frozen in time, a poignant reminder of the child they all missed so painfully. Lisa, still grappling with overwhelming dilemmas of guilt and despair, spent her days arranging bouquets of colorful flowers around the Hausia tribute, meant for a daughter who was still hanging on in her heart. Detective Gray found himself entangled in the aftermath as well. The case had reopened vulnerabilities within him that he thought were buried deep beneath years of experience. He often drove by the Daniel residence, feeling the weight of their tragedy as he recalled every facet of their ordeal. The faces of the family haunted him, a reminder that while one chapter had been closed, many more remained unwritten. One crisp autumn afternoon, Lisa decided to organize a community gathering in honor of Sofia, a chance to bring the town together and channel the remnants of grief into something meaningful. Flyers were printed and distributed, encouraging neighbors to celebrate their lost light through stories and remembrance. The response was overwhelming. On the day of the event, families filled the local park, their hearts heavy yet unified in purpose. Colorful balloons danced in the wind, and laughter permeated the air, a stark contrast to the sorrow that once plagued the community. Each participant was invited to share their favorite reads or ideas in Sofia's name. Lisa felt the warmth of empathy envelop her, understanding that even amidst deep pain, resilience could be found. Gray attended as well, standing quietly at the periphery. He watched as the town enveloped the Daniels with love and support, stoking the embers of healing in a shared space. It was a moment of collective strength, where the comfort of community superseded despair. Children ran through the grass, their laughter cutting through the heaviness, reminding the adults of joy that must be reclaimed. Later, Lisa stepped forward with a small podium, her voice quaking yet resolute as she addressed the crowd. Today, we are reminded not to dwell solely on the darkness that can overshadow our lives. Sofia shines still through every child's grin, through memories etched in our hearts. Her laughter will ripple like the wind, and we will honor her by choosing to live vibrantly. Inspired by her words, those gathered pledged to build a scholarship in Sofia's name, supporting local youth in arts and education. Gray found himself leaning into the collective memory of hope. Amid the struggles that once eclipsed them, the community began to nurture a new narrative, one of resilience against turmoil's grip. As the sun set and long shadows danced across the park, Gray felt a burden slowly lift. He knew that justice had been served, but healing would take time. Each balloon that floated away into the sky was a promise to carry Sofia's spirit forward, a blend of sorrow woven tightly with threads of renewal. The battle against grief was far from over, but the emergence of purpose ignited a fiery determination within. The memories of Sofia would never cease to exist. Instead, they served as a reminder to cherish the light in the darkest of times, a truth that could outlast the shadows time and again. And in that, perhaps, lay the deepest form of justice of all. Reflection. Months have slipped away since Sofia's trial, yet the journey has left indelible marks on those who dare to remember. Detective Gray often found himself retracing his steps, reliving the moments that had thrown him into the chaos of pain and resilience. The images of the once vibrant neighborhood haunted Haime's lingering face was a testament to shared sorrow. It was a reflection of the fragility of childhood, a haunting reminder of innocence lost. Lisa, still wrestling with the deeper emotions of her experience, had taken to journaling, her pages filled with memories, glimpses of Sofia's laughter echoing in the hallways of their home, fleeting snapshots of sunshine illuminating their gritty reality. She reflected on the community's embrace, a force that transformed her pain into a lighthouse that could guide others through their darkest hours. Each time she opened her notebook, she felt a comforting weight. She was not alone in her grief. As the seasons changed, she remained committed to the scholarship established in Sofia's name, organizing events, inviting guest speakers, and intertwining art and education in a way that echoed their lost daughter's spirit. It became both a tribute and a sanctuary, a place where conversations transformed from whispered fears to powerful affirmations of light. For Gray, the case taught him more about the resilience of the human spirit than any experience prior had prepared him for. He found solace in connecting with those he once felt removed from. The Daniels journey became intertwined with his own sense of purpose. He knew they would carry the weight of grief together, strengthened by the love that replaced isolation. As he stared at the children playing in the park one afternoon, too aware that life swept forward with relentless motion, he began to understand that healing was not a destination, but a continual ebb and flow. The pain would recede and rise like tides, shaping who they were and what they could become. In moments of reflection, each child's laughter rang clearly, a vivid reminder to permeate even the darkest sorrow. Sofia's spirit had become woven into the fabric of the town, a reminder to cherish all that life offers amidst its unpredictable chaos. And so, the story transformed not merely as a narrative of loss, but as a celebration of resilience threaded tightly with love. A dance of grief and hope coalescing into a renewed bond for all who yearned for peace.